morning, Christ the King Church. Greetings from the United States. It has been our heart's desire to see you again in May, but I don't think the coronavirus is going to let us make that trip. We send our deepest condolences to Margaret, to John, to the family during this time of loss of her brother. I'm wanting to talk to you a little bit this morning about some of the things people are feeling during this time of very unusual history. A lot of people I've talked to are struggling with anxieties. How many of you have ever suffered from anxiety? Sometimes your palms sweat, your heart beats fast, your mouth goes dry. Maybe even your knees feel weak and tremble. Some people have intestinal, stomach problems. Webster says anxiety is this nervous agitation, this kind of worry that comes over an apprehension about a danger, a fear of real or imagined danger. And it has these physiological manifestations. Sometimes fear of danger is not real, but it's perceived. How many of you have been caught up watching television? One of the things we found out in the last couple of years here in the United States is how much of our media is actually false media. They put a spin on things to benefit either a political stance or something else that they're trying to achieve or whatever their owners want them to say. So some fear is not really, it's a perceived fear. It's not a real fear. Other anxiety, David says, I'm full of anxiety because of my sin in Psalms 38. Sometimes sin produces an anxiety. There's another type of anxiety that is produced from just circumstances that are absolutely impossible. You really care about them, but you're unable to do anything but to pray. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then there are other anxieties that just come from the normal burdens of life, provision, future, this type of thing. So before I go any further, I want to give you a couple of notes about fear-based behavior, about anxiety, and how it can rule and actually ruin our lives. Here's the number one rule. There is a real fear produced by a perception of impending danger. When a threat is perceived, your adrenals kick into gear, and the protective fight or flight rises up within you. Now, that is a good thing. I've heard stories, countless stories, of supernatural things done. A 100-pound lady going to the front of her car and lifting the front of her car off of a child that's caught underneath. In her normal state, could never have the type of strength to lift a car. But when that anxiety, that fear, that adrenaline kicks into gear, all of a sudden she's able to do things she was never able to do before. Here's the second thought. Fear many times resides in the absence of truth. Now, that's really where I want to focus. Conversely stated, where there is truth, fear does not exist. You can't have them coexist. There's not room for fear. It's like walking into a dark room, and you could be afraid of what's in the dark room until you turn the light on. All you need to do is turn the light on, and instantly the light, the truth, removes the fear. Now, here's a third thought. Truth replaced by a lie, by you intentionally receiving a lie, will actually lead to a type of disabling behavior. So you can live in an absence of truth or in a vacuum of truth. That's one situation. But when you actually displace that truth with a lie and you receive the lie, you believe the lie, then it can result in ongoing deception and other types of disabling behavior. Whether that lie, belief in that lie is intentional or unintentional. Let me turn you to 2 Timothy 1:7. It's an incredible verse, a major verse in the Bible about fear. It says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." God has not given us a spirit of fear, but He's given us a spirit of power and of love and a sound mind, a disciplined mind, a mind that has accurate and sound judgment. It seems that all anxieties, all apprehensions or fears fall into one of these three vacuums. A vacuum of power, of love, or of sound mind. Now remember, fear only exists in the absence of truth. So in all three of these categories, power, love, and a sound mind, the absence of truth touches usually one of two realms. It'll be an absence of truth about a person, a thing, a circumstance. It may be the absence of truth about the reality of the coronavirus. How many people are actually dying? How do you actually contract that virus? Is every flu coronavirus right now? These kinds of absence of truth. A second thing that fear will attach to is an absence of truth about God and his ability or his desire to deal with a circumstance or situation. There must be a lie in the absence of truth in one of those two areas in order for us to end up with a disabling or destructive type of behavior. Let me give you an example. You may look at power. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power. And we see that the enemy is going to have something to say about power. He'll lie about whether or not we have power, whether or not the coronavirus has power, whether or not God has power in his ability to deal with this particular situation. Remember, God says he does not give power for destruction, but to build you up. Power is given, again, not for destruction, but for building up. God never intended power to be destructive. He intended it to be creative, to be encouraging, to be exhorting. It was a power that comes from heaven to earth, which builds you up. So one aspect of fear is to get you to believe a lie about power. It says that this coronavirus has the power. It has the power of death, the power of destruction. Remember, the thief comes to kill, steal, and to destroy. So there's a lie about power that says it is bringing destruction upon your body. Now, if you swallow that lie, then there's going to be room for fear. In all the areas of lies about power, they will ultimately connect to the fear of death. They will say death has the power. You remember the Apostle Paul says, death, where is your sting? The truth is death has no power. Fear comes in and exists in the absence of truth. So we talk about an issue of a disconnected trust, or how we need to trust God more in these times. Let me give you some practical helps to deal with anxiety. Remember, this is one quick note about trust. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2, 4, and 5, my message and my preaching were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but in a demonstration of power and the Spirit, so that your faith may not rest in the wisdom of men, but your faith would rest in the power of God, which translated means faith rests in God's power, his ability. So how does anxiety get a root? Well, some people are born with a transgenerational iniquity of fear. They're anxious about everything. They're fearful about everything. They're very susceptible to depression, this type of thing. It means it's passed down from generation to generation. But others struggle with anxiety because some trauma has happened in their life. They went through something traumatic, and now anxiety and worry are connecting to the fear of the past trauma. An abuse, an accident, burned in a fire, electrocuted, nearly drowned. It induced an anxiety-based behavior. But another type of anxiety people struggle with is an anxiety that's connected to identity, which means that there is a significant when there is a significant disconnection with our identity, it results in an inability to trust. For example, if I have a father who abandoned me while growing up, I might have difficulty trusting father figures or even trusting God. And it may result that I'm unable to trust and am very susceptible to anxiety due to the fear that God, because he's a father figure, he's not going to care for me, he's not going to provide or protect me, the normal attributes of a caring father. I have this anxiety, God won't carry them out because I experienced the trauma where my natural father did not fulfill these areas. Anxiety can also be induced by secret areas in our lives. When we hide sin areas, these areas produce a fear of discovery or a fear of being uncovered. And thus a big major piece of stress develops when somebody gets close to these particular areas in our lives. All right, let me give you some practical keys to anxiety. Number one, remember you're not alone. God is with you in the midst of all of this that we're walking through right now. You are not alone. Number two, answer your worth. Are you not worth more than they? He says in verse 26 of Matthew 6. You remember he's talking about the birds and the animals. They don't worry. They have great provision. So he says, don't worry about what you drink or where you live, but rather seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. So he says in verse 34, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So take a moment and answer the question, are you not worth much more than they, the birds of the air? Number 3, reconnect your faith. Reconnect your faith. I've many times used this definition of a conscious trust connection with God. When I focus on God and see him as bigger than my problems, my personality, my situation, my circumstances, then I'm able to connect my trust. But when I take my eyes off of the circumstances, the situations, the problems, and I put them on the problems, excuse me, I said that backwards. When I take them off God and put them on the problems, then I disconnect my trust. Take a moment and reconnect your faith. Let me challenge you in these times as to how much time you actually spend listening to your television. Yes, I believe you need to be informed, but you don't need to be informed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And also realize the information you're getting may not be the most accurate of informations. So number 5, clarify your purpose, your vision. Eliminate the double vision. Readjust your priorities. Examine, why are you here? What are you doing? Where are you going? What's the big picture of God's purpose? These are incredible questions to answer during this time. And then lastly, pray away anxiety. Let me give you a few verses in conclusion that you might think on and pray on. Be anxious for nothing, Philippians 4:6. But in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxieties upon him, because he cares for you. Jeremiah 17 verses 7 and 8 says, blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose trust is the Lord. For he shall be like a tree planted by the water, and will not fear when the heat comes, and will not be anxious in a year of drought. I'm talking to you just for a few minutes today about how to remove some of the anxieties in our lives. During this time where so many things are fear-based, our information many times is fear-based. What is happening in the markets all over the world is fear-based. During these times, we need to refocus and reconnect our trust. Yes, do the things you know to do. Don't act ignorantly and say, well, I'm a child of God, therefore I can not have to wash my hands, and I don't need to wear a mask, and I can go anywhere I want to go. Don't do those types of things. I liken it unto this. Yes, I believe the power of God. I believe the kingdom resides within me. Even as my wife went out and I went out and shopped yesterday, before we went into the supermarket, we declared the presence of God within us. The kingdom of God within us would come forth. Light would dispel darkness, and we are carriers of life and light, and therefore anything of darkness, death, destruction would have to flee as we walk in the kingdom of God. We pray those types of things, but in the same breath, when we got home, we washed our hands, we took off our clothes, we made sure everything was clean and properly sanitized. I liken it unto people sometimes that have this great belief for faith of healing, and I am a faith man when it comes to the areas of healing. But he gets a splinter in his finger, and he says, well, God, I want you to come take the splinter out. Well, no, you reach down and pull the little sucker out. You know, sometimes do the things that you know you need to do, but don't ever disconnect that trust. And realize that God is always able. He's there with you, and he's bigger than this virus and everything going on. I believe this is a wonderful time to re-examine the depths of our purpose and what we are doing here in the kingdom and for the kingdom's sake. It's a wonderful time that God is reordering his church, and I believe that as we come out on the other end of this later in the summer, that the structural skeleton of the church is going to be much different. We're finding things that we can do with technology we have not been able to do before. I was accosted out of Costa Rica by this virus, and asked to return home. The very day I was scheduled to open a conference, the pastor calls and said, we just came out of staff meeting. It's a fairly large church, 14, 15, 1,600 people. And he said, we're not going to be able to go ahead with the conference as it is. We can't have the public gathering. That would be way over the 50 number limit in Costa Rica, even though Costa Rica has experienced only a couple of deaths from the virus. Very, very limited spread down in Central America. So he said to me, Bob, would you consider coming in and let's do a virtual conference? So I went in and I preached 4 messages in about a 4.5, 5 hour period of time with translator. And then they broadcast those messages over the following nights, and they found that their attendance was well over 2,000 people because they had a captive audience. People are at home who and able to attend and listen who normally would not have. They gave extra time and special instruction as to how to give online, and they found that their offerings were actually up rather than down. So we're having to learn how to do some things a little bit differently. And I believe that the skeletal, the bone structure of the church is actually having some chiropractic adjustment during this time. These are exciting times, wonderful times. My heart is with you. Our prayers are with you. And I look forward to seeing you each again as soon as possible. God bless you.